Hello, everyone. Welcome. You are listening into an audio only version of our Office Hour podcast, and it is going to be such a fantastic topic for today. I'm really excited to be chatting with the Clucker in Chief at Chicken Clucks. We have interfaced with her previously in our June 2025 disaster exercise and preparedness week. And today we're talking specifically about chicken preparedness. She is an expert with a university degree in animal sciences and over a decade of experience in advising professional poultry farms and feed factories worldwide. She is a backyard chicken keeper and not just your typical homesteader or blogger. Her advice and feed recipes have helped to raise millions, possibly even billions of chickens worldwide. Welcome. I'm so excited to hear more about you and then to have some really fun dialogue around chicken preparedness. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. Yeah, so what brought me in was my love for animals. Um, and I think when I was a child, I already knew very early on that I wanted to do something later with animals. And then you start looking into studies and you find animal sciences. So that was 1 and 1 equals 2. And later I sort of specialized in nutrition. And I really loved it. I still really like it. But nutrition is not the only thing that matters on a big farm. Management is maybe even more important. So I think a holistic view was what interested me. But I specialized in nutrition. And that's what I've been doing now for, I think already 14 years, something like that. And what is also good to mention is that, I worked in many different countries, and I also liked that aspect a lot. So that I could travel a lot, meet different people, different cultures, different poultry farm settings. Yeah, every time was different, and that aspect of the work I also really liked.
That's such an amazing background. I can absolutely hear the curiosity seeking in your background. And I think that that really resonates with all of our audience, particularly also the love of animals and thinking about what we can do to be good guardians for them. A lot of us in the community are medical professionals, but we have our own animals, our own fur kids, or in this case, feathered kids to be taken care of. So we're really beginning to think about what are all the species in the family? What do we need to do to prepare? And some of the things that first come to mind for me as a medical professional are wound care. What have you experienced from that initial wound care side? What would be your kind of guidance topics for people to put in their first aid bag?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think maybe first of all, good to mention is that animal science is not a veterinarian degree. I do have very practical experience and I've worked with a lot of veterinarians, but I am not one myself, and you are. So if I'm saying anything that you think is incorrect, feel free to jump in. But I think, over the years, I've worked with many veterinarians, and I think the first thing that comes to mind is not necessarily what is in your bag, but more how to act, because many
Mm,
people sort of freak out when they see that an animal is hurting and has blood on it, or the wound looks really bad. And I think that the first thing you need to realize is that when there is really wound care, the first decision you need to make is this something that's savable, as harsh as it sounds? So you have to think, can we manage this? Is this just a small flesh wound, or is it really something big or more serious? Then you have to think about euthanizing your chicken, because it's the most humane thing to do in some cases, but let's assume that it's just a wound. And then first of all, I would tell, stay calm. Even if there's blood, just stay calm. Try to catch the bird. Try to, take it, put it aside somewhere and try to stop the bleeding first. That's the first thing. Sometimes there can be a lot of blood, and if the chicken is flapping around all the time, then it can be a bloody mess, literally. So apply pressure. Yeah, if your chicken is bleeding from the comb, from the wattle, from the skin, then you can apply either, for example, cornstarch or special styptic powder that helps stop the bleeding. So that helps quite a lot. And you, of course, apply pressure, and you try not to panic, which is also sometimes a mental thing you have to think about. Then it's important to clean the wound. And yeah, ideally you wash your hands, but I think in practice you don't have the time for that, to be honest. So ideally, yeah, like you as a veterinarian, you always learn to first wash and disinfect your hands. But I think in practice, it's probably not going to be manageable always. But yeah, try to do that. Clean the wound. And you can do that, for example, with boiled water. So clean water or water from a water bottle that is clean. And you can use a saline solution, but yeah, you can imagine that if you do that just on your own skin, it hurts a little bit. It is the most clean, but yeah, that's something to keep into mind. And you disinfect with special disinfectant. And then you can use, for example, I know there is the vetericin or other agents that are blue in color. That's even better. Because if you use a blue spray that's blue in color, if there is a red wound or the flesh below the feathers is a bit reddish, chickens like to peck at red colors. So if one has a wound and there is stress, there's a high chance that there will be almost a feather pecking until the chicken is bleeding again, sometimes even cannibalism. So that is not what we want. So then I would prefer to use like a blue spray, like Blue Coat. There's also a brand that's sometimes used. And it doesn't only have disinfectant properties, but it also masks the red color of the blood or the skin.
I remember when in a
Um,
previous conversation, you taught me that first, that chickens are going to be pecking at red colored things. And that makes so much sense just to be able to cover it. But that was absolutely the first time that I had learned that. So fascinating.
And it's quite interesting because the reason why that is so programmed biologically is that because often birds have a red beak. So as a chick, they get like worms or biologically in the wild, they get insects from their mother and they give it to them in that red beak. So that's why this color is so biologically imprinted that they have to peck at it for some reason or
Wow,
that
that's
there
so
is food
fascinating.
to be found. Okay, so then we cleaned, we disinfected, we stopped the bleeding in the opposite order. Then it's good to maybe use wound gauze, but I think if there are still a lot of feathers, that is sort of difficult. And you also have special sprays like you have for humans that are like Band-Aid sprays.
Hmm.
I'm not sure. Yeah, it's like almost a plastic layer on top of a wound. That can help, but in some cases, if it's really a surface level wound, it can also help to just keep it open so it can air and it can breathe and it can dry up, let's say. It's more or less the same as what you do for your own wounds, only the feathers are more difficult to manage. Go ahead.
I have two questions for you on that one. So, one is in flushing the wound. So, you spoke about washing the wound off for sure with clean water, maybe saline, but that might be a little bit uncomfortable for the chicken, but for sure something clean. Is when I think about wound care in other species, mammals that I'm more familiar with, having a little bit of pressure behind the rinse is important to get debris out. So we might pull up water in a syringe, like a large syringe, so that you can kind of push it hard. Does that make sense? So there's a little bit of a spray kind of getting gross debris or some of that bacteria contamination off. Is that something that's useful in the field? Could you imagine? I can imagine. I often put like a syringe in my dog's go bag for my clients, so they specifically have that wound care ability. What do you think about that?
I think that's a really good addition. Yeah. And that does help because, yeah, if you clean and you just pour over water, then the dirt doesn't come out. And
Hmm.
if it's bleeding very hard, then the blood coming out is what's cleaning the wound already. But if there's a surface level wound, yeah, that's important.
And that was a really nice ad there. And I'll just say it again for our audience. When we're dealing with a wound, having some fresh bleeding, and I don't mean blood gushing, I just mean a little bit of new red blood when you're cleaning that wound is actually useful because it tells you that, as you've just said, the debris is off. There are hopefully more healthy cell populations there, and the dead or damaged cells have kind of been flushed aside. So it's okay to see a little bit more bleeding in most wound care. Again, not blood gushing out of an artery or out of a vein, but just a little
Yeah.
bit of more bright red. that's when you kind of know that you've washed some of those off, and then to proceed to your other steps of cleaning and covering, things like that. I wonder about the hand sanitization. And you mentioned so appropriately that in clinic we have the wash sink. So if we're going to do a wound repair, we're washing quite intentionally in lots of little crevices, and even maybe put gloves on. So what about like a field hand sanitizer, just like a alcohol-based spray? What do you think about that for maybe a more field-ready way to create a little bit of sanitation before you deal with the wound? Would that be possible?
I think that's a very good suggestion. I think that is a very good addition. That's doable. And yeah, you probably will see the difference when your chicken really needs urgent care and the blood is gushing out, like you said, then you're not going to sanitize your hands. But in most cases, when you actually can do something as a hobby farmer, then you have the time maybe to sanitize your hands. Only I would say if you're, because time is sometimes of an issue when you're evacuating, really.
Hmm.
If it's either the chicken or you, then yeah, for sure leave them behind. And yeah, then it's important to first, yeah, get your family safe. But if the situation gives you a little time, then that would be great to sanitize your hands with disinfectant. Yeah.
I want to make sure that I leave space for you to add anything else on that wound care piece that you want to. But the next question that comes for me is, should I separate wounded chickens? And I wonder if we could talk about crates and carriers and that sort of thing. So anything else on the wound care or first aid side?
No, nothing. I think that's complete. And you're totally right. You should separate the chickens because then you spray them with the blue stuff. But if still blood is coming out and you put four of them in one crate, you can imagine what happens because they will be stressed. So that's not a smart idea. And if you have no other option because your car is full with your own stuff, and then unfortunately it has to be like that. But if you have the space and you have enough crates, then that would be ideal to separate. That's maybe a good addition to the wound care part, that if it's not urgent and it's like a scrape wound, just put them in the car and deal with it when you and your family are safe, because I don't want you to go and follow all the steps and sanitize your hands and jeopardize your family.
Yeah, I like that addition to the timeline because, or the processing timeline, because it lets you make some decisions about biosecurity, like cleaning your hands, like kind of setting up your workspace. If it's not urgent, then take the time to prepare. Or if you're in the middle of a very urgent situation, like active evacuation, make sure the animal's stable and then do the specific wound repair later. So just prioritizing what is the biggest threat here, and then making sure you can do as many of those steps, making time for those steps as you go along. So I love this. Let's talk next about crates and carriers and things like that. I've seen dog crates for chickens to be put into. In fact, that's what we practiced in our September exercise. But you've taught me about some specific crates. And in this article that you did such a beautiful job on, you actually have a couple of links and descriptions about what's available. Can you talk to us a little bit about crates and transport equipment, and especially if you want to drop anything about how we would separate the chickens, like who should we be separating? We already know wounded chickens, but are there any other animals that we should put in separate spaces?
Yeah, if you have a lot of different breeds, you have different size chickens, and that
Mm.
also matters. And also different breeds have different, how to say, behaviors. Some are more active or more naturally more aggressive than others. So I would say you probably know your chickens best if you know that there are a few aggressors. Like keep them apart. Don't put those all together in one crate, because then yeah, it'll be mayhem because you probably need to drive a few hours before you're safe. That's not a smart idea to do. And I think that for the crates, so you have special poultry crates, special chicken crates that you actually they are used quite a lot for professional poultry farms, because yeah, when they're transported like that, and those are yeah special poultry crates which are quite low, so they're big in length and width, but not in height, because chickens are not that high, and they have rosters suitable for chicken legs, and yeah, they are open all around. Oh yeah, yeah. So you can easily they can easily it ventilates through the box, and you can easily stack them. And that is maybe the one of the most important things, that if you use a dog or a cat carrier, those are quite high. So it takes space in your car. Plus, it's made out of metal, so it's heavier. And these special chicken crates are made out of plastic. It's also especially the rasters are smaller, so special for the feet of the chicken, so that they don't, that the feet don't sink through the bottom. And you can stack them easily, so you can fit way more chicken in your car or separate them nicely in the crates if you have multiple. So I would really recommend, and they're not that expensive, so I think that would be really good to have. And an additional tip, if you do not have chickens yet, it's also easy to have. If you buy chickens, you need to transport them also. Or if you go to the veterinarian or for whatever reason, that's really convenient to have these crates. Just if you have time, don't forget to put like a cardboard underneath so that your car doesn't get dirty because they don't have a closed bottom on purpose, because if you stack them, the bottom needs to ventilate. Oh, and put your wounded chickens on top because the droppings will go down. So put your wounded chickens on top so that they don't get the feces of all the chickens above them in the car.
I love that addition. Biosecurity always. I was going to ask you the question about the cardboard bits, and in my mind, I would have put sort of cardboard under each one of them. I think that's what I would do more for a dog or cat because they wouldn't want to have those little open bars. But I see what you're saying about that's like meant for the chicken's feet and better for them to actually stand on. So I have a really good picture in my mind of cardboard on the bottom, so on the car, like on the trunk of the car, cardboard first, and then stacked up as we go, and essentially the healthiest chickens at the bottom, right? We want either the wounded, or if
Yeah.
we had maybe our senior birds, would we even put those towards the top? So in my mind, we kind of have this tower of biosecurity with the most potentially immunocompromised or weaker at the top and our strongest, healthier ones at the bottom. I can absolutely see that in my mind. And I love that you brought up the point that no matter where you're taking your chickens, to the veterinarian, picking them up, just any kind of transport, having a method that they know, as well as you know how to handle, is really useful. Do you feel like training with these crates themselves would be useful for preventing or at least lowering stress when using them? Is training with the equipment really important? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that would be good because the crates are not that high, so they have to get used to it. And also driving in the car is something they're not familiar with. But it often goes pretty well, like with dogs or babies, if you put them in the car, it's kind of soothing because unless you have to drive like crazy, it can be soothing. Um, and it can help if you get them used to music and you put on the similar type of music in the car. That's also relaxing, also I think for humans even. So that can help. Yeah, and about the cardboard, I would like to add that yes, you can put cardboard in the box, but I would not prefer it if you stack them because actually, if you have a long driving time, like I don't know, 20 hours, which is probably not going to happen, then you can put cardboard because you can put some feed on top of it. But if you just have a few hours of driving, I would not do it because then with their feet, they can grip the raster, which is made for that purpose, and they cannot slip in the car. So if you have to brake suddenly, yeah, they don't slip. And also for ventilation purposes, it's better if you leave it open. You just put one. My preference would be to put one cardboard just to keep your car clean, under all the crates stacked on top of each other. So if you're driving for, I don't know, maximum, let's say 6 hours, you don't need to put feed, then that would be my preference. And then you feed them when you get there and you give them water then.
And I'm glad that you're mentioning this about ventilation. I see a lot of birds, not necessarily chickens, but birds in general, be covered by a blanket to be less upset, to kind of create a quieter environment. But I hear you talking about ventilation. Would you suggest that these crates are open in the car and just that one piece of cardboard on the bottom? Or is there something over them? What are your thoughts on that?
If you are going to stack them, because the boxes are not so high, and if you're going to stack them, I would leave it open as much as possible just for ventilation purposes. And if you want to make it more relaxing and more dark, I would consider more to put it on the windows of the car in the back rather than over the crate. Because I think if you have a bird in a cage, or you have a parrot, I don't know, the cage is a bit bigger and you're not stacking them. And this is a smaller space because you want to save space in the trunk of your car and it's full there. So I wouldn't do that. I would be very careful with that.
Beautiful. That was so informative. But I love the suggestion of covering the car windows. So you're still trying to create that quieter environment. They're not seeing all the other vehicles flash by, or if there is a disaster that you're driving through. So you can still think about that quieter environment, but maintain ventilation. Okay, I want to ask you a little bit more about feed since now we've evacuated, we're driving, and probably we're getting close to a time where we need to give a meal of some kind. So thinking about feeding, I have a couple of questions or I want to talk first about the mechanics of that. What's the equipment? What would you suggest that we're taking food in? And now that we have our chickens in these crates, how are we actually feeding them? So let's talk first about equipment on the feeder side. And then I'd love to chat about like the strategy. What are we actually feeding them?
Yeah, so maybe good to separate two situations. So either you evacuate your chickens in the back of your car in the crates, and then you drive to a location and you go out, or you leave them behind, and those are two totally different things. If you take your chickens with you in the car, then when you arrive, you most probably at first will keep them in the crates, right? That's convenient. And then you probably will just sprinkle the feed over the crates because then they will not be stacked anymore. Most probably you might have something under or they're outside. And you can take a small piece of cardboard or a small platter and yeah, put it in the crate to feed them. But most likely you will try to get them out of that crate and try to provide some sort of a safe space where they can roam around. And then it's enough to have like a cheap plastic feeder where you can put the feed. That's not so, how to say, that's easy to bring. It's not heavy. I would keep the practical solution then, but clean it very well because yeah, your chickens are stressed, and make sure that you don't put too much feed, that you keep the feed fresh because yeah, if they are stressed, you have to take extra care of preventing any type of bacteria or viral agents. And if you keep your chickens, if you cannot evacuate your chickens, then I have a really preferred feeder because then it becomes very important that you have an automatic feeder. So you have those gravity feeders where you put in a huge amount and then below, yeah, the feed will automatically come out. So you don't need to do anything for that. And you can put in enough feed for maybe a longer time if you have bigger ones. And personally, I really like the cradle feeders. That is when you have the feeder, but the chicken has to push on a cradle, stand on a cradle for it to open. So also rats and rodents cannot access and it'll eat the feed of your chickens. Because if there is a disaster, they will be very smart to find, to eat your chicken's feed more than usual. So that's why I really like these feeders, and I think I put some on my website as well. But you have like the Grandpa's Cradle Feeder. It's a very well-known brand. I think something like that would be great.
Do you have suggestions? So still on that equipment piece, how do we create that roamable area in a disaster? Are there options like in a dog in mammal world? There would be like a pen that I can bring that sort of is freestanding. I can almost create a little exercise pen area. Are there options for mobile chicken areas? I'm not sure how to ask that better, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I have never heard about it, but I've also never done the research. But one thing that is important, chickens can fly, so you need to cover it. So whatever you set up, and probably you're not going to put wire mesh in the back of your car,
Right.
but that might be an option. A wire mesh and then just like a cutter. Then
Mm-hmm.
you can always build some DIY something, do it yourself when you're there. But I don't know if there are any like almost tent-like options.
And I wonder if there's anything that I could do from the sheltering side. So imagining that our medical team was at the shelter point, the evacuation point. Um, is there anything that we could set up or have available that makes that easier? Like wire, I hear you saying wire, but
Yeah.
um, if we set up an area for the chickens to have a break, we're really gonna need to think about biosecurity because then that's multiple chickens gathering. How could I handle that as a medical professional? What would be your guidance there to think about that piece of it?
That's a really good question. I think for sure make a section for to isolate the birds that are sick. And yeah, if possible, but I'm not sure if that is possible, to make more sections so that you can put the chickens of one person in one, keep them in one pen. So don't mix all the flocks because yeah, A, you have to keep them apart when they're going home again, and B, yeah, for the chickens will always try to establish pecking order. And
Mm.
if you put a lot of flocks together, they will continuously peck at each other more than usual because they keep needing to establish that pecking order, and that also gives stress. And I think average backyard flocks, they range about, let's say, 3 to max 20 hens, maybe 10 very often. I don't know, depends on the state you're living in. And if they're evacuated, by the way, probably you don't have 20 because it doesn't fit. You probably have a small flock. So that would really help to make smaller sections of wire mesh to put flocks of one person in one pen and maybe a few separation areas for the sick birds or wounded birds.
Frequently on the dog side or the horse side, we don't often have this option on the cat side, but we can have an area where the animal can go to exercise. So, an area where they're allowed to be maybe with their pet parents, have a little bit of a break. And I don't think that would work on the chicken side because we're essentially putting them all in one area and allowing, from biosecurity. But I wonder if a family, if they were in an area with their chickens in the crates, these smaller, shorter crates, and then my medical team brought something that was like an exercise pen. So something even that we would use for a dog and create a space that's chickens can't get through. And then the chickens could get out into it. And then when they've had their break, they go back into the smaller crates. And then we take the movable pen and move on to the next family. It feels like that would keep the biosecurity of that family in one spot. And I could sanitize the fence in between each use, but then I'm moving the fence to the next family's space. Does that make
Yeah,
sense? And then what do you think about that?
yeah, that makes sense. I think you can do that. And I think that for the chickens that are not wounded, I think lowering stress is more important than like disinfection.
Mm,
I think the chickens that are not really wounded badly, I think disinfecting is not your first priority. It should not be. It should be water feed, low stress, and not too many other changes. If you can prevent any other big change than all the changes already happening, that will help a lot. And I think mixing flocks is because of the pecking order is a huge one. And a light, like you mentioned, same in the car. Light can also really help to yeah, if there's not too bright light, the chickens don't like bright light naturally because many people don't know this, but they're actually forest animals uh, in the wild that like to come out when the sun is almost down. I don't know how to call it, that hour that it's becoming darker, but the sun it's not dark yet.
yes,
What is the
dusk.
name for that?
Dusk. One of my favorite
Dusk and
times.
dawn.
I did
Yeah.
not know that they were forest creatures. How amazing.
Yeah, so normally they don't like to go out in an open field in the middle of the day because then predators can be circling above them. So they normally in the wild they only go out of the forest to scratch and peck and have their normal feeding foraging behavior. When it's dusk or dawn, they don't like to have that bright light and that open space from above. In stress situations like on hobby farms, they're used to it and it's fine because all the chickens in the run are kept like that. But in stress situations, it sometimes therefore helps to have it a bit darker or have a darker space that you cover part of the run with a blanket so that they have some safe space to
Yeah.
go back into.
Does that also affect our feeding strategy from a time perspective? Are there particular times of day that you should feed a stressed chicken? Maybe you don't normally do that in non-stressful times, but should we be feeding them at dusk and dawn if that's what their normal foraging behavior is?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think more importantly that it's important that you get feed and water in, and I don't care so much when. I would almost say give them ad libitum feed, so that means 24 hours a day. Just don't, I think it's not necessary to take it away, especially for layers. They will eat what they need, and yeah, they should start eating sooner the better. And drinking, especially drinking, that's even more important.
Well, we didn't quite speak about water equipment. Can we backtrack a little bit to the equipment part and speak about watering devices? I do want to learn more about what we should be feeding, so more like feeding strategy, but what about equipment on the water side, especially if that's where there's going to be a problem, if it's really important to see them drinking?
Yeah, I think again, the same with the feeders. You take the simple plastic ones to take with you. That's fine. But if you have to leave them behind, it has to be a bigger water because you have to calculate how much they drink and feed for a certain number of days that you estimate to be gone. It would be great if it can fit a week supply of feed and water, because yeah, if you have to evacuate, you can be away for a couple of days. And I think, yeah, practically having it for 2 weeks will be, then you will have really huge feeder, but that might be an option.
So access to food consistently, but I think you said previously not overfeeding. But did you meant that from a so the food doesn't go bad. So don't put out like this huge amount of food
Yeah,
so that it
yes,
gets mildewy or bacteria in
yeah.
it, but they should have constant access. Is that right? Did I understand you correctly?
That's exactly right. That's what we call in poultry farms, we call it ad libitum feeding, which is, I think, Latin for unlimited feed, but that doesn't mean that you put it in for a week in advance because it hardens. If you put it in the open air, feed hardens, and it's just not so palatable. It's like you put our bread in yeah, on a plate just without a bag over it, and then after a week you can eat it. Well, good luck. So you feed them ad libitum, so they should be always feed in the feeder, but it should stay fresh. So don't put for 1 week in one place, except when you leave them behind, because then you have no choice. But if you then have like a treadle feeder, there's only part of the feed that's coming out that's in the open air. The rest is in the closed box. So that also helps to keep it more fresh. And with water, that's the same. And personally, I really like the nipple drinkers because you have like big watering bins that are closed, and then on the bottom there are nipples. And one last thing you need to take care of, that if you leave behind waterers and feeders, make sure they're not easy to knock over or uh, to bind them to something, or some that they, if they're knocked over, if something falls down, or if there's a big storm and they're knocked over, then yeah, then too bad.
I love that information. I would not have thought about the not knocking over part. So at least strap it to something or make sure it's really, really stable because we're assuming this is in a disaster. So high winds, happening earthquake, there could be so many things going on. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. Make sure it's stable if you leave it behind with you, light, easy to transport, and then
Yeah.
freshness. So changing over your feed and your water frequently, but as much access as possible. So 24-hour food and water access so they're actually getting it into them. What about supplements, and or do we change what they're being fed in a stressful circumstance? And should we leave supplements behind for the ones that we didn't evacuate? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a really good question. And there are so many supplements in the market. So I think I'm gonna just try to give a short answer without naming all of them and what they do. But I think overall, I would say, first of all, give your supplements preferably in the water, because if animals are sick, they stop eating, but they will not likely stop drinking. So that's the first thing. And things that we in poultry farms often give to stressed birds in water is vitamin C, amino acids, in general, extra vitamins, amino acids for a bit of protein still, and sometimes acids for gut health. So that would be my summary, uh, short answer, without going into too much technical detail.
I can imagine there are a lot of supplements and a lot of different options there. Is there a concern especially in the chickens we left behind, about that getting old? So having supplementation in water over a long period of time, does that become
Oh,
concerning?
that's a good one. I didn't think about that. But yes, normally you give I would recommend those supplements in the water when you evacuate. But it's then the water gets dirty. That's why you're asking. Most probably the water gets dirty really fast because, yeah, bacteria also like all these supplements in the water. So your water will get dirty faster. So actually, I wouldn't really recommend supplements if you leave them behind. Maybe acids, but still, I think that's not something you should focus on. I think it's more important to have enough water to make sure that it stays upright, that it stays there. Um, that for me is more important than having supplements. And I would say in terms of feed, I think I wouldn't add supplements necessarily in the feed, but there are more higher concentrated feeds. And you could question, do you want to use mesh or pellet? Because for hens, it's easier to eat pellets. They will eat faster and more of it because they finish. Yeah, it takes more time to packet all the small particles in mesh. However, if they're used to a certain feed, switching can also give a disadvantage. So yeah, there is no right answer there. I think I would just stick to what you're giving, not switch feed structure suddenly. But if you have to switch, for example, at the shelter, if they have different feed, then always switch from mesh to pellet, but not the other way around.
Because they're more likely to eat the pellet, and if they eat the pellet, they're going to get more calories in if they eat just a piece of it. Is that true?
Yeah,
Is that what
they're
you mean?
likely to eat more. It is like when you're eating. I don't know how to compare this. Because you're eating such huge chunks and your body gets a signal later that you're full, I think in humans it takes about 20 minutes, right? Before your insulin kicks and your brain thinks it's full. So if you, like me, like French fries a lot and you eat very quickly a lot of French fries, then you eat way more than when you eat a salad because it takes a long time and the calorie count is low. And then after 20 minutes, I'm halfway my salad and I think, okay, I'm full, I'm done. With French fries, half an hour later, I feel sick because I ate too much. And with mesh and pellet, the feed composition can be the same. So it's not always about concentration, but the principle is the same that you have. Just you eat quicker with pellets than with mesh.
And I hear the same theme that you've mentioned in other sections, that keeping things the same, so low stress, is sort of the most important piece. What do your chickens know? What have you practiced with? What is the same for them? Would that be true? Am I understanding you correctly? If
Yes,
keeping the
yes, for
pattern is
sure.
probably the best way to keep them healthy and immune system healthy.
I think yes. Overall, for sure, yes.
Do you think that we should be training them to different textures? I think about felines, and this is a big thing, or the picky dog, but very much a thing in cats, making sure they don't develop a texture preference so that when they are stressed, we do have different options for them, different tastes that they'll accept, different a pate versus a mince thing versus a kibble. I definitely struggle that with my own cat, and think about it a lot for his disaster preparedness, because what he likes when he's stressed is like this very carefully prepared meal that I can't necessarily recreate in a disaster scenario when I know he's going to be stressed. What do you think about that?
For chickens, I would say it doesn't matter that much. It's maybe if you on commercial farms, you have to think about a difference of maybe 10% in feed intake mesh to pellet if you switch. So I think that switching will not have a really big effect like in other animals. But I don't know about the brain size of a chicken, but I think it cannot how to say it does have preference and it does have taste, but it's not the same, I think, as for a cat or a dog or for us as humans.
You just
Yeah, and
training
cats
him, I
I
see.
think are naturally more, they have more preferences, right?
Yes.
Because they also only eat the good parts
Yes.
of an animal, while a dog canine eats the whole thing.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Now, for chickens, it doesn't matter that much, but if your chicken is already sick and if it's already eating less, then that 10% makes a difference. But normally, I would say no, I wouldn't worry about that.
Okay.
What I do worry about is if you use a cradle feeder, don't start doing it during because you have to train them to stand on top of the cradle for the feeder to open. So that is an important one. If you work at the shelter, don't put cradle feeders there thinking, oh, that's convenient, because if those animals don't know how to use them, it may take them a couple, 1 or 2 days to figure it out. Normally it goes pretty fast because they see others doing it, but that would be, yeah, something not to do. So cradle feeders at home, yes, and train them how to do it. They will probably get it pretty quickly. But if you put it at the shelter and the chickens don't know how to use it, then that's not a good place to start at that moment.
I would assume that chicken guardians would know this already, but I don't know this. So this is mostly a selfish, curious question. How would I calculate how much food to take? Or let me ask it from a different direction. As the health professional at a shelter, can I make an estimate of how much food I should have if I have an idea of how many chickens might be coming? So I guess you could answer it from either direction, but how do we
Yeah.
plan for food from a management perspective for chickens?
Yeah, I think that's something that I work with every day, and even 2 decimals behind the comma, because feed intake is we calculate for professional poultry farms, we calculate FCR. So how many kilograms of meat does it take to have 1 kilogram of meat or eggs? And if you can get a number down by a higher concentration or better feed, yeah, that's my whole job, my daily work. So I would say it depends on the size of your chicken and the age and the production, what they eat, because if they lay eggs, they produce more and they will eat more. But on average, I would say 100 to 150 grams per chicken, depending on the size per day, per chicken per day. 100 to 150 grams. And if you assume 150, I think you're on the safe side, because on a commercial poultry farm, normally it's about 110 grams per chicken. And if it's older, like 60 weeks, then maybe 120 grams. If you have larger species, then maybe 150. But if you calculate with 150 grams per bird per day, then I think you will have a bit of feed left. That's on the safe side.
I have known some individuals who have tube fed a chicken, and I know what that means on the mammal side. So to put a feeding tube in so that we can actually give them food directly into the stomach. If the animal's not eating or has an injury somewhere else they can't eat on their own, would tube feeding a chicken ever be useful in a disaster scenario? And should I be prepared for that as a medical professional to be able to assist? What are your thoughts on that topic?
To be honest, I've never done that before. So I cannot give you the answer there. I just know tube feeding from a not so nice perspective, like when you have like foie gras, which I personally don't like, but yeah, then you have sort of these practices. But no, not from a care perspective, from a veterinary perspective.
Yeah, fascinating. And I don't know how to do that. Again, I don't often medically care for birds, but I just know colleagues that have done that for backyard birds, have had a beak injury or were struggling with health and were not eating on their own. So to kind of get them past that period of time until they started eating again on their own. So because I'd love to know, how can I be prepared? What should I be able to do as a medical professional? Is that something I should have in my supply kit? And if it is an option, maybe that's, a pet parent teachable skill. So that's an interesting avenue for us to explore down, because I definitely don't know the answer.
Yeah, and I have one idea now that in the wild, normally a mother bird chews, or yeah, with the saliva, the feed is already half digested and it drops it in the open beak of a chick. And the chick or the, yeah, has its beak wide open and is dropped in the, yeah, in the back of the throat. And I think swallowed immediately without even chewing. So if the damage is in the beak, I think a similar tactics might work. But if it's in the throat, yeah, then I think you're going to have to operate, and I cannot help you there.
What a fascinating topic. Okay, so uh, that was really informative. I feel like I have a much better plan of what goes from preparing for disaster, what goes in my first aid bag, kind of getting the chickens out, thinking about them at the actual shelter. I have some ideas from the medical perspective of things where I need to up my skills and do some more research. So I think I want to bring us, as we begin to move towards closing, more towards that bigger disaster preparedness idea. So thinking about family preparedness, ideas around One Health, so human health, animal health, ecosystem health, kind of these bigger preparedness planning ideas. Any thoughts that you want to start off with there? I mean, you have this beautiful article that I'll just reference again about emergency preparedness and thinking about all these different things that we've chatted through. What are some big thoughts from you on that preparedness integration into family preparedness?
Yeah, I think first of all, you and your family go first, so keep that in mind always and every time. And it's not worth to save your chickens if you have to jeopardize, yeah, you or your family. And secondly, I think also automation and smart options are now readily available. So, for example, I think many chicken owners already have them, but the automatic chicken coop doors, they really help because you can, on a distance, you can open and close them. So that, for example, when a disaster happens and there's a storm, you might want to keep them in the coop, maybe, depending on where it is. If you think the coop is going to damage or a tree is going to fall on top of it, then don't keep them in the coop. But yeah, I leave that onto you, onto the owner to think about. But then at least you can manage that because you can open and close the door from a distance. And then keep in mind that there are automatic chicken doors with solar options. So that have a solar panel. Because yeah, if the power is out, then it will not open and close anymore. And there are also, yeah, there are so many options. I actually wrote an article about my top 7 automatic chicken doors, which is nice to check. But then from a preparedness perspective, check the solar options and check how the opening and closing is arranged, because you have apps to do it, but you also have chicken coops with light sensors. And also on the solar option chicken coop doors, I found out when I dug into it that some of them, they still rely in some way on the electrical network. So it's not directly connected. So if for example, then there is a battery that needs to be charged with the solar energy, but if there is no power, then that battery, for some reason, you have to manually switch it. So from solar to the grid or something. Yeah, that is not going to work in an emergency situation. So I think I made a table at the beginning of the article where I put all those kind of specifics. So with that mindset, take a look at that, and yeah, and then choose what is best in your situation. And there are also, which also really nice, cameras, smart cameras with predator detection that you can put on the coop or on the run just to keep an eye on them. That can help, yeah, to know how they're doing.
And that's such an important part of preparedness planning is to spend the time thinking about what's the worst possible scenario, what could possibly happen. And I think that automations, electricity, internet access, Bluetooth is so available right now that it's really hard for us to plan effectively uh, for if that doesn't work, for if there is no electricity. So spend some time in your planning process imagining what if there's no electricity? What is everything connected to? And like my cat's auto feeder is really important in our schedule and our ability to kind of have for me to take some trips. But if the power goes out and it doesn't turn back on, I have to have a backup plan for it. So it is really a piece that needs to be in your strategy when thinking about what would I do? Just like when you're packing your go bag, putting your first aid kit together, what happens when something else is missing, when I don't have gas in my car, when I don't have electricity? So that's kind of the hard part of disaster planning is to project that far out. Comments on that automation piece? I think that's super interesting.
No, and I think in general in preparedness planning, I think I can better ask you like what is gonna come in yeah in your, are there any exercise coming up, or do you have new resources? Because yeah, for me this is a whole new area to think about. So for me it's really interesting. So I'm just curious to know if anything is coming up or if you have new resources or exercises coming up.
Yes, absolutely. And just the idea of practice it. No matter how good your plan is, unless you've tried it out, there's probably something you haven't thought about. So actually practicing it as a community is definitely what the Preparedness Collective is about. We're built on trying to create the opportunities for communities to practice together. So we have our next disaster exercise coming up in this month, September. And then on the 27th, we're actually going to have a community evacuation exercise. And it's just an opportunity for you to set aside some time to think about, what is my plan? Even if that only means that for a couple of minutes you look at your go bag, open it, take it out, sit and think about what happens if the electricity goes off. That counts. So that absolutely counts as doing evacuation preparedness, because you've taken a few steps forward towards the goal. If our community really, anyone in our community wants to actually practice putting their animals in the car, participating as a role player, we have some of our medical team practicing some scenarios as well. So you can actually be quite involved in a disaster exercise if you're interested. It is an opportunity for us to kind of roll up our sleeves and do some community practice. And so that's going to be really fun. I hope we have a lot of participants in that this year.
Oh, that sounds really great. I think that the only way to really prepare is to actually do it, to fake it and to test it, because otherwise you can think you react in one way and you can think you're ready, but you're actually probably not. I think even after 10 exercises, maybe you still find new things that you can do. Oh, that's really great to hear. And I was also wondering, you mentioned already the emergency preparedness article on the website that I made together with your platform. But I was also wondering which other articles you actually liked the most from the website of Chicken Clucks.
Yes, I would love to list a few, because I have found your website to be such an amazing resource. That was how I connected with you originally, was looking for preparedness resources for backyard um, flock guardians. And so, of mine that are my favorite, definitely the one that you wrote on emergency preparedness recently with us. You also have a basic how to keep chickens safe on your getting started page, all the basics for chicken care. And as we've talked about, it goes to planning. What does your coop look like? What does your feeder look like? What are you training them from the beginning? What are they used to? The handling. So I really like that page, just the getting started one. You mentioned the 7 best automatic chicken coop doors, and you've done a review of that of 2025, and I love that article. I think it's really important for us to think about that. How do they get in, out? What are the automation needs? All those pieces. I have one also that I like. You've called it "How to Build Your Predator-Proof Chicken Coop in the Right Way," and that one stands out to me because a lot of chicken owners in our area struggle with keeping raccoons out, skunks sometimes. So I really thought that article was lovely. And then another one that I love is the lighting guide for egg production. I'm really interested in the effects of different wavelengths and frequencies on animals. And so I really enjoyed that particular article as well.
Oh, that's really good to hear. I tried to make all the knowledge that I have on large farms available for also hobby keepers, because I think very often there is very generic information to be found, but actually, yeah, from a specialist point of view, there is way more to it. There are so many details, and I sometimes even struggle to not mention all the details to keep it interesting for a larger audience. But oh, that's good to know. Maybe also good to mention that I have a newsletter nowadays. So if you're interested in the articles, you can subscribe and you'll get an update. And also after subscribing, you get a free chicken log. So I created a free chicken log where you can track your feed intake and your egg production. Yeah, which can also be quite nice. So if you subscribe, you get it. You can download the PDF file and print it out at home.
That's amazing to know. I'm definitely a subscriber. I love that there's a journaling component, because from the medicine side, from the health side, seeing those trends over time is the best indicator of kind of what's going on. And so I love that we would have that in place from a disaster preparedness perspective, that we can actually have a baseline and then be able to chart what happens after the disaster in the evacuation shelter. So thank you so much for that. Anything to say as we close? I've learned so much. I'm so excited to share this with our
Yeah,
audience.
I would say thank you for having me. I think it's really interesting to be part of this collective. For me, it's really been also a journey, because I haven't thought about this topic so much yet. So for me, it's also really interesting. So thanks for having me. And I would say keep on the good work. And I really like your exercises and the resources that you have available.
Thank you so much. I look forward to all of the future collaborations we'll have.
Thank you. Bye bye.